Well, welcome YouTube. It's been a long time in coming, but here you go. The towing of the camper at 70 miles an hour.
So we just finished filling up the truck here at the Meyer gas station, and we're going to go ahead and reset this. Reset. Yes. Over. Yes. So now we're getting ready to do our 100-mile loop. I actually need to make sure that my trailer has been selected. I showed you guys that a little bit earlier. Got a different message, but that's okay. Talking about the trailer brake controller gain was not set, but it really was. So we are good to go. So we're gonna get little messages here about the parking assist and everything else being turned off, because the ultrasonic sensors, of course, having the camper in the way messes with its ability to know whether something else is back there or not. But here we go. This is going to be, I gotta start this other camera up so you guys can see some of the data as we get on the highway here. So plan is nice and easy, getting up to 70 miles an hour, setting the cruise, and you guys can see on this secondary screen here, we did finish the regen just before we pulled into the fueling station, and we are starting out with a freshly cleaned DPF filter. On the way here, this thing was actually towing in 10th gear. Probably on the way back because of the winds. Today we have winds somewhere between 12 and 14 miles an hour out of the west. So this section of the trip, heading east towards Port Huron, this we should get pretty darn good mileage towing. And of course it is downhill a little bit as you get closer to Lake Erie. And then on our way back, we're going to be hitting some headwinds, and we'll also be coming uphill a little bit. So it's a pretty good test today to see how we do. 12 mile an hour headwind actually adds quite a bit to the aerodynamic resistance of the overall setup. So we are up to 70 miles an hour. Cruise control has been set, and I'm using cruise control with the non-adaptive cruise control, only because the adaptive cruise control tends to overshoot and undershoot a little bit more. And of course, I think I've shown you guys videos, the gap, people just don't believe in giving a gap when they pull over, and the truck doesn't understand their actual speed and the fact that they're going faster than everybody else. So it ends up slowing down, which then makes for a really bad ride, because then the person behind you will go around you and pass you and kind of, I won't say cut you off, but kind of cut you off, and then you'll slow down again, and the person behind you, it just becomes a repetitive cycle that someday we'll get it right, or maybe someday all vehicles will be adaptive and the whole line will just slow down, and we'll see how that goes. So we've now kicked into 10th gear. You can see that on the RPM gauge. We're at about 1700 RPMs, just under 1700 RPMs, running at 70 miles an hour, towing our trailer. And the trailer weighs in right around, I think it's gonna be 7,200 pounds. That includes, tongue weight and also the axle weight that's been added. Maybe closer to 7,000 pounds, but we'll do some math and I'll put that up here on the screen. Overall, handling dynamics are really good with the truck. I have nothing to complain about when it comes to handling dynamics. Now, in saying that, part of that is because of the Hensley hitch. The Hensley hitch is truly, I don't want to say amazing, but it's really, really good. Being able to have that thing take care of any of the side, whether it's wind or whether it's mostly wind, either crosswinds or passing semi-trailers. There's no longer the trailer or the tail wagging the dog. Basically, the thing stays in a really good line. There may be small little pushes to the left or to the right as you're going down the road, but nothing like having for sure an inexpensive hitch. I decided to not go with a mid-range hitch only because when I was towing with the Colorado, of course, being a lighter vehicle, the Silverado is a heavier truck, still has a very nice smooth suspension, but having a lighter truck, I wasn't sure if by going with some of the higher end equalizer, those types of hitches, Blue Ox, I looked at those, but I wasn't sure whether they would meet the needs that I thought I had. I know by spending the money and just going for the best hitch out there that I wouldn't have any concerns whatsoever with vehicle dynamics. So having to steer out of the way, and when I had the Colorado, we'd actually taken a trip down to Cedar Point, and on the way back from Cedar Point, I actually had an opportunity to veer out of the way, swerve out of the way, so that I didn't end up hitting somebody, and everything tracked so nice and true. And I've also had a lot of trips with the Colorado, and some trips with this too, with high winds coming crosswinds. And again, it's super comfortable, almost as comfortable as just driving the truck without anything there at all. So we've just went up a couple of little hills, and of course with the tailwind, this thing is still sticking right there in 10th gear. We now have, I don't know, several minutes, at least 6 minutes on the clock. I'm probably going to stop talking for a little while until we get to the end. I will go ahead and speed up some of this footage so that you guys can see. Oh, one more thing before we sign off, I want you guys to take a look at. So there's been a lot of concern about how warm the truck runs when you're not towing. And I've looked at questions and I've answered some people's questions, and please feel free to ask as many questions as you guys want, as many questions as you guys have. I'm more than happy to try to answer them directly or try to find out answers from people that I have input from. But one of the things I wanted you guys to take a look at, so we've been going up a few hills. Granted, it's now 48 degrees out. It's no longer 46, but a couple degrees warmer. But like I had mentioned, the truck actually runs cooler while we're towing. So looking at the gauge, that line there is about 185 to 190. It looks like looking at the other gauges here that we're at 195 degrees Fahrenheit, which isn't a bad temperature at all. It definitely stays a lot lower while towing. And then the other thing that I wanted you guys to take a look at, since we are under a higher load, no one's mentioned this yet, but the engine oil pressure, it is a variable displacement oil pressure oil pump, and you'll notice that while towing, the engine does know that we're under a higher load. And if you take a look, like right now, we're at 100% of torque. So it will, of course, overboost some in order to maintain the gear. But you'll notice that our oil pressure is actually higher. So the pressure and the volume, since we are towing and we are using more fuel, the expectation, of course, is the pump is doing what it needs to do to protect all of the internals of the engine. So that's it for me for right now. I'm going to go ahead and we'll speed up some of this footage, and I may talk over a little bit of it, and I will definitely get back with you guys as soon as we get to the turnaround point, and we'll see how we're doing as far as fuel economy is going. So one of the things that I was hoping to show you guys was the transparent trailer mode. So I've mentioned that I have the extra camera, and I'll go back around back to show you guys that camera at the end of this video. And I'll probably have a couple other videos on it too. But anyways, the transparent trailer mode, essentially you add the camera to the back of the camper. And since I've got a little bit of time to talk to you guys, one of the things that's interesting is, since I had one of the first trucks with this mode available, or with the extra cameras available, basically the dealership was unaware of how to install the camera on the back of the camper. There's one other thing that's kind of super critical if you want to be able to use the transparent trailer mode setup, and that is that the camper that you can have actually does have an overall length that is limiting it. So it's never really been publicized too terribly much, but the length limit is basically the camper that I've got. It's the 27 RES Cougar. Overall, I think from the hitch to the back of the camper is approximately 30 feet. In fact, I'm stretching that a tiny bit, because you probably need a 26-foot camper in order for, or 26-foot trailer, whether it's a camper or a stock trailer, or, and it only works currently with travel trailers that are bumper mount. It will not work with trailers that are gooseneck or that are fifth wheel. But when it works, it's really, really cool. So as you can see in the middle there, the middle is the camera that's mounted on the back of the camper. I have a rack on the back of my camper. That came standard on my particular model year of Cougar. You also see the two other cameras, the left camera and the right camera, stitched together. And I was hoping, I actually was able to get this thing to calibrate. I was able to see it for a short period of time, but the problem is you have to go, it took my truck about a mile on one of the main roads. Luckily it was a 4-lane road, and you're not supposed to go faster than, I think it's 32 miles an hour while the thing is going through its calibration procedure. On top of that, that rack that I've got on the back, I actually had to take off. So I'm not sure. I was hoping that this thing was going to keep the calibration settings and that it wouldn't have to redo the calibration. But as soon as I switched over, so this is that one, and then you can also look out back, which is a really cool view. When I go to transparent trailer mode, it took about a mile, and of course you got to go slow. It's actually looking at the lines on the road in order to figure out how to stitch those three cameras together. And it might actually be using the camera on the tailgate also as a fourth camera to stitch stuff together. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. But anyways, it's a really cool mode, and unfortunately I'm not going to be able to show it to you today, but that may end up having to wait until springtime. We're here in Michigan. You can tell maybe from the screen, or maybe you can tell from other parts of the video, we've lost most of our leaves, and we've actually already had 3, 4, 5 inches of snow. Luckily that's been gone, and we had a little bit of rain, which has helped clean off the road, and that's why I'm out doing this loop for you guys. So I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention. There's also 2 other cameras that you can look at. This one you can only look at for 8 seconds, and the same thing goes for this one. You can take a look down to make sure everything is still working properly. So since I don't have the transparent trailer mode, this mode will stay active for the entire time, and it is kind of nice because at least you can see out back to see what's coming up behind you. Click on the trailer. Yep, status. So we now have the status, and we'll click on the trailer. So this is really, I can't say enough about having TPMS sensors. Getting on the freeway, so turn on my blinker and it went there. So I can't say enough about having TPMS sensors in the trailer tires themselves.
this thing will, when you program it, when you actually set everything up, it asks you what the pressures are supposed to be. And if one of those gets too low, basically you get a message, just like you'd get any other message on your little information screen there in the center of the dash. I'm gonna have to say, I'm hoping that I never ever have another trailer tire blowout. And I'm really thinking that by having this tire pressure information and having the ability to see the temperatures, hopefully that will eliminate it in the future. So we're going to go ahead and take a look through the screens here on the truck. So currently we have a range remaining of 305 miles. Now that range, it does take a little while for the range to adjust based on your driving habits. So it's not actually really looking at the last 50 miles or anything. Oil life, there we go, at 68% is what my oil life is sitting at 6,135 miles. Tire pressures, I typically run the front tires a little bit higher than the rear tires, and we started out at something like 37 and 35. So even these tires have warmed up on the truck a little bit, increased in pressure. Air filter life, that's been sitting at 80% almost from the get-go. It dropped from 100 down to 80 and it's been staying there. Brake pad life, that 97% for the front, 98% for the rear. Here's the fuel economy over the last 50 miles, 11.2 miles per gallon is what it's referencing as my average. My best so far is 32.9 miles per gallon. Following distance, I actually don't have anybody in front of me, so that's off. The lane keeping assist, I am running the lane keeping assist, and you guys will see the icon next to the 70 mile an hour thing up top there telling you when it thinks I get too close to the lines. Most of the time it's the line on the passenger side. Fuel filter life, 77% of that is still remaining. We're up to 152.3 hours on the engine. Transmission temperature pretty much has been sitting rock solid at 196, 195, maybe as high as 198. Trailer brake controller gain is set right now at 9. It's dry out. Typically I'll run it, if it's wet, I'll run it a little bit lower, and since I'm not really running heavy, I don't necessarily need 10. It will not lock up the tires, at least not at speed. And then we're down to the four-wheel drive settings. Oh, we just, good event. Just went up a little tiny hill there, and we've downshifted, I believe, into 8th gear. And in a second here, it should end up going back into 9th gear. And it did. So we're in two-wheel drive, and yeah, basically the off-road type data that you would expect. And then my DEF fluid. So when I got the truck, of course, 500 miles in was the break-in period, and I did start doing some towing, and I had quite a bit to do for the farm. So I was towing, and I ended up filling up the DEF. I've actually got a page in my little book that talks about DEF. So at 1,845 miles, I received the since I was doing a lot of towing, basically it told me I had 1,000 miles left over, and when I switched over to this particular page, it was showing that I still had half of the DEF tank available. So I have not seen the message this time, and of course I'm a lot lower, and that's been a long time ago. I'll actually have to look up to see when I did fill it up, but it might have been in the 2,400 mile range. But again, most of that was towing, and when you're towing, the truck is really trying to keep the NOx down as low as possible. In fact, I'm going to show you guys this. Since I am towing, here's a view of torque, and you'll see the pre-NOx and then the post-NOx values there. So basically we are actually going through quite a bit of DEF at the moment, and what you'll end up seeing while you're not towing, if you're looking at these particular values, you'll have maybe somewhere 85 to 90%, and again, it's a weird number because they call it out as ppm, but I don't know what those values actually mean. All I can say is when you're driving normally and it's injecting the DEF, the post NOx will be somewhere very close, minus 98 to minus 99. So it does an extremely good job at light engine loads of making sure that there is no NOx coming out of the engine, basically meaning smog, smog producing oxides of nitrogen. So it does a great job. In fact, I know I've said this on another video, but the air coming in is kind of getting cleaned with all of the processes that we have in place for the particular diesel engine. Wow. Speaking of the message, so on our screen there, you'll see that it's now really starting to drop. I'm barely going at all, and with the amount of DEF that we're using, now we're really starting to see those values drop off. And I still haven't been able to calculate the actual number of grams per kilometer that the truck is using. There's a formula behind it, and I'm still working on it. If you guys check out my other videos, I will make a link again to the torque values that I am sharing on my Google Drive. They're things that don't exist in the standard GM pack that Ian actually, you can add to torque if you buy the Torque Pro setup. So, and we're back into 8th gear again on a smaller hill, and you see how fast the DEF is starting to drop off. The number of miles that are remaining, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that so we can just go back to our trip monitor here and see down to 11.2 miles per gallon and running right now in 8th gear for a tiny bit. But with DEF, so diesel exhaust fluid, if you run out of diesel exhaust fluid, the truck will actually start to limit your speed, and at some point in time, basically the truck is not going to allow you to drive it if it is polluting. So it will limit your speed to something like 65 miles per hour, and I don't remember the exact number, whether it's 200 miles after you run out, after it thinks you ran out. And of course, it knows based on those pre-NOx and those post-NOx if there's a problem in the cleaning system. Wow. So just something really interesting for you guys to take a look at. If you'll notice what our coolant temperature is. So it is still 40. Let's see, what is our temperature? It's still 48 degrees out, and the truck decided that it went all the way down to a longer hill or something, but it was definitely pushing some water and cooling the engine down. So we're going to go ahead and stop again, and I'll just speed this up until we get back and do our final calculation on the fuel mileage. So I did actually miss going through the data for when we did the turnaround there at the halfway point. It turns out we were at 12.4 miles per gallon during the initial phase, driving towards the east. So one other thing that I didn't have an opportunity to tell you guys so far was about the overall performance of the truck and basically what gear the truck was staying in. So on our trip to the east with the tailwind, the truck did actually remain in 10th gear, I would say close to 99% of the time. There was only once or twice when it kicked down. On the way back towards the west, coming into the headwind, it spent probably something like 90% of its time in 9th gear, and then it would kick down a few times. I actually had a little incident. Overall, the run was extremely clean, but I did have one spot just there that passed by where we did have to kick down and go into to pass a couple of people. So the other thing that I wanted to let you guys know, the truck now has 6,164 miles on it. So I actually checked the oil consumption just to see how we were doing in that area, and I am down about half a quart. So it does look like the motor is still running about 1 quart every 4,000 miles.
So one thing to note here, looking at some of the data, you'll see that while towing, in particular into the headwind, you know, the DPF temperature, which is that EGT2 temperature, has been in the 900 to 950 degree Fahrenheit range. We're getting ready to pull off the freeway here. Just wanted to show you that. The 16.9% full is what the DPF filter is actually reporting. So in general, like I had said on the halfway point, running the engine hard is the best thing to keep the filter, to keep that filter clean. Of course, you do burn a lot of fuel. So we're way down to 10.7 miles per gallon at the moment is what we're seeing on the trip computer. Again, Google calls this out as being a 103 mile run. The truck, I think, ends up underreporting it a tiny bit. So we're gonna go ahead and go back, fill up at the same pump that we filled up for at the beginning of this test, and see how many gallons of diesel fuel we've burned, and do the hand calculation to see what our overall fuel efficiency is. And one of the other things that I don't know if anybody else has reported on this or not yet, but when you are in tow haul mode, the one thing that you don't get is auto start stop. So tow haul mode actually is one way to defeat the auto start stop on the truck. So the other thing that I typically will do with at least some of these newer vehicles, you can either have a very light foot on the brake and auto start stop will not engage, or the other thing, the way to get around it is, actually push down hard, it'll do the auto start stop, and if you let off a little bit and then push back down on the brake, the engine will restart. I actually think that the last couple of vehicles that I've had, the auto start stop function is actually really useful, and even for keeping things like the DPF temperature up or the catalyst temperature up, for making overall efficiency improvements. I think that's actually a really good thing that these engines should be doing, because they can hold the heat in to the cat or into the DPF, and that way when you go to take off again, you've got good high temperatures, and it essentially lights off very quickly. So we are back, and I'm going to go ahead and shut her down, and we will see what we have when we're done. So I wanted to go ahead and show you guys this camera that's mounted on the back of the Cougar. So you can see I've got the little table back here to be able to put stuff, but
that's where the camera should be mounted, and I've got some details on the height that it should be when compared to the height of the camera that's on the tailgate. Originally, that's where I had it mounted. I may end up moving it back to those holes. I was able to find one stud. This actually is where a stud was at. So I was able to find a stud, but essentially ran it down along the side, and then it actually runs underneath the camper all the way up. So GM recommends that you run it under or above the trailer, but in reality I ended up running mine this way. Makes more sense to me, and of course I've tried to do as good a job as I could to get the cables all in the right spot. So we've went ahead, and it's been more than 30 seconds because I didn't realize it was finished. So there we go, 9.247 gallons and 103 miles. So we're going to go ahead and calculate that up and see what our fuel economy was. So here we go, we have 103 miles divided by 9.247 miles per gallon. That gives us 11.14 miles per gallon, or 11.1 miles per gallon over that 103 mile loop. The truck itself is reporting currently 10.8 miles per gallon, so it is a little bit it is reporting a little bit lower than the actual mileage than what we actually got during this run. Well, I hope you guys have enjoyed this MPG loop towing the Cougar 27 RES. Please make sure that you guys rate and subscribe if you're not subscribing already. And again, go ahead, ask questions as much as you guys want. And also, I got one other thing for all of you that have actually hung around to the end of this video. I know it's going to be a long one. My question for you is, do you want to see a live podcast or a live broadcast on Amazon or YouTube? Wow. Do you want to see a live broadcast on YouTube? I'm willing to give it a shot. I've never done it before, but to be able to answer questions, specific questions that you guys may have, actually it's kind of funny, even taking a look at the data right now, coming from the truck, we're higher on the temperature thing. According to here, we're running at 210 degrees. According to the gauge, it's above 210. But anyways, question, live YouTube cast, something that you guys are interested or not, leave me a note in the comments and I'll see what I can do. Thanks again for watching, appreciate it.